Next up is actually CNOC. CNOC is a platinum sponsor of this event, and we have Bill Sandiford, who needs no introduction, but because he's not quite here yet, I will give him one. Bill is the president of Telnet Communications, entering the room now, a growing CLEC operating in the Greater Toronto Area of Canada. He's 17 years of experience. He's been was the founding president of CNOC since it's been formed just a few years ago. He's also involved with a lot of other organizations, such as Aaron, CIRA, where he's the vice chair, Alberta IX, probably forgetting a few. So, Bill, thank you for your perfect timing to come up and give your presentation, which I think I'm assisting with in some way.
You are.
That's true. So can we
Good afternoon, everyone. I look around and I see some CNOC members, which is great, but I also see some non-CNOC members, and let the sales pitch begin. So what we wanted to talk to you about today really was a little bit about who CNOC is, what we do, why we do it, and give you some insight into our structure, and then talk a little bit about why you truly need to be a part of it. Initially, I was going to do this myself, but as I started to lose my voice, I thought, geez, I'll just bring some of our committee chairs up and get them to do their own piece. So then it struck me, wow, I should have just planned it this way from the beginning. So I have joining me Michael Garb, who you all know, who leads our Member Services Committee, Paul Anderson, who leads our Operations Committee, Pete Rocca, who leads our Regulatory Committee, and then in addition to being the president of the organization, I also run our Government Relations Committee. So CNOC was formed about 4 years ago now, when a bunch of us as ISPs recognized that there was a need for a new organization to ensure that our needs were being met in terms of advocacy in Ottawa or with other levels of government, and to try and bring the community, the competitive ISP community together. So we had some initial meetings that went well, we formed, and we set up a structure which for the most part is very similar to the structure we still have in place today. So we hold monthly meetings. Every other month is via teleconference, and the opposite months are usually done in person at various points around the country, usually where our members are located. And but most of the work that we do gets done outside of those meetings in our committees. So I'll start by bringing up Pete Rocca, and he'll tell you a little bit about, come on up here, Pete. He'll tell you a little bit about the Regulatory Committee and how that committee works and what they do. And I'll give it to you, Pete.
Do you have a stool or?
Here, hold on.
Perfect. Well, thanks for the 3.5 minutes notice to prepare for this.
You got 3.5 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. No, so as Bill said, you know, it's been an amazing organization. The power that we've been able to, the trust that we've been able to achieve over the last few years, it's just been incredible. I think back to those initial meetings where there's a lot of people sitting back in their chairs and arms crossed and didn't really know how we were going to communicate. And you know, over the course of the last few years, we've really learned to trust and listen to each other. There's a lot of smart people that are sitting around that table, and a lot more smart people that we like to see. So in terms of the Regulatory Committee, though, what we do is we also meet monthly by teleconference in addition to the general members' meetings or briefings. And we get together to discuss the regulatory issues before us. So we review all the files that come out of the Commission, as well as any Part 1s or applications being submitted by all of the ILECs and cable cos, review them and see whether or not how that affects our members. The Regulatory Committee then makes recommendations on whether or not there's files that we need to pursue. We collectively make that decision, and we also work collectively to define what it is that we're going to make a response for. That is then reviewed by the Regulatory Committee, a recommendation is made, and we pursue it. So we really have found that there's a lot of common issues, obviously, that every one of us in here face as a network operator. And collectively, we've been able to, you know, use a lot of brain share, a lot of sweat and effort from everybody involved to produce some good work. And I think, you know, as a result, we've had some excellent success over the last few years. So.
Thanks, Pete. I think if we look at our Regulatory Committee, it goes without saying that if you take a look at a lot of the decisions that have come out from the CRTC or even policies that have been come out from the government, that we can see our efforts at work, and we've literally put millions of dollars back into the hands of the competitive ISP industry by taking up files that we just previously weren't taking up or weren't being adequately represented by our sector. So, Pete's our current regulatory chair. Keith Stevens is in the room. He played a large part for a few years as the regulatory chair committee, and that work is great. So I encourage, if anyone has some questions, to corner Pete in the hallway, and I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next we'll bring up Paul Anderson. Paul is the chair of our operations committee, and he'll tell you a little bit about what he does there and go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So the regulatory committee is a little bit more the public facing, since obviously they deal a lot with the CRTC and the public documents. Our committee was formed initially very Bell focused, but has expanded to deal with all the carriers that CNOC members deal with, to see where we might be able to sit down together with the carriers to work through issues that independent ISPs are facing from a technical or an operational, ordering process issues, repair issues, any of those kinds of issues, technical issues. And we've done a variety of things. The work ramps up and down. We did a lot of work with Bell to bring a VDSL modem to our members, which was something that a lot of them were looking for. We've dealt with, helped when new major products have been announced through some of the carriers, such as like when UBB came out, we worked with some of the carriers to try and at least iron out some of the details from the decision to try and make it the deployment from both organizations' perspective as little impact as possible. And it's also just a great forum for the technical or operational people of our members who sit on a mailing list and can just bounce ideas off, or just say, we seem to be having this problem getting XYZ done with, said carrier. Does anybody else have it? And you'll see a Me Too pop up, or and there's some great information sharing, sometimes even avoiding that. So I think that's in a bit of a nutshell. It's I think a lot of our members have found a great value, and we have had very good success with some of the carriers. Some of them have given us great teams to work with on their side, and we've been able to really ease a lot of speed bumps that a lot of independent ISPs were facing in their day-to-day operations. So I think that's about it.
All right. Thanks, Paul. And finally, we'll bring up Michael Garb, and he'll tell you about the about stuff.
So I've had a few jobs while I've been involved with CNOC. I was one of the founding members. I remember walking down the street with Bill Sandiford when we were really just formulating CNOC, and Bill saying, I think I could really get into this, and I'd love to have the opportunity to run this and be the president. And it was really a conversation down behind 151 Front that led to a lot of the formation of what CNOC is today. The first job I had in CNOC was I was responsible for government relations, which made all the sense in the world because I knew nothing about it. I think a few months later, after the firm that I hired to do the government relations exploded in Ottawa and they were gone, they said, I think there was a separate meeting I wasn't invited to where they said, well, we got to find something else for Michael to do now. And so they put me in charge of carrier negotiations. Is anybody here aware of anything we've negotiated? So now I run the ISP Summit. And that also came out of an idea that I basically had. And I want to talk about that because that was really the formation of what turned into member services, because it wasn't member services until we did something besides the summit. And as we got together and we started working with each other, it was sort of a weird thing, right? I mean, because we're competitors with each other, right? I mean, everybody thought, well, I can't work with him and I can't work with her because we compete with one another. We're, they're going to know my secrets, the recipe to my sauce, and what we found out was that we had so much more in common with each other, with commiserating with each other, and like. Problems that were similar to one another, that it was simple. It was easy for us to get to know each other and to work with each other. And we started not just to become people who worked together towards a common goal, we started to become friends. We started to talk to each other. We started doing business with each other. And I mentioned yesterday when I was up on the other panel that I've got a space at 151 Front that is largely full today because I wanted to put together a special offer for other CNOC members to come in and co-locate with us. And that's exactly what they did. And we've got about 7 other CNOC members, including ourselves, all in one space. And now all of a sudden that means we might qualify for a Torix node right in the space, again helping each other reduce costs. So as we got to know each other and got to like each other and got to understand the benefit of working with one another, I said, hey, why don't we put together something where not just members of CNOC, but other members of the community at large could come together. And the first idea was that it would just be other ISPs. And I can't remember who it was, but someone said, well, no, we've got to bring in the suppliers, the sponsors. And we thought at first, would these folks who sometimes we're duking it out with, would they want to come and take part in an event like this? And the addition of the sponsors came to be, and it was incredibly valuable to the event. I think that you'll all agree that not only are you talking with each other here at the ISP Summit, you're talking to Bell, you're talking to TELUS, you're talking to Cisco, you're talking to all the different sponsors who, quite frankly, might not be spending as much time with you as you'd like. And you might not be able to get the information that you'd get. You might not be able to talk to the people at the level you're talking to if you hadn't come here. And so all of that, and then all of a sudden there was some media coverage, and there was the interested other parties. And what started off as an idea, why don't we get together, turned into what you've experienced here over the past 3 days, and it's been great. So we started looking for other things that we could do to deliver services to CNOC. And one of the first things we did was to say that we ought to do something else, not just get together as a group once a year, but do something else exactly 6 months from now. And we started doing this in 2012, in May 2012. We had the first CNOC, I guess we called it off-site conference call, which happened in Las Vegas. There's a lot of really good stories, but you know about what happens in Las Vegas. So then this year we went to New Orleans, and we had a great time, some of which I can tell you about, such as Segway tours through all over New Orleans, and just a lot of one-on-one time. Again, a tremendous amount of business being done, information being shared. It wasn't just, it starts off by going to a fun place, but it ends up being a lot of us getting to know each other and the businesses that we do, and breaking down walls. The conversations that I just had at lunch today, I was sitting with Mark Gaudreau, I was sitting with Mal Cohen, and we didn't have to worry about all the pretense or everything else. It was all right there. So we're expanding the member services. Again, we're going back to Las Vegas in May of 2014. We're going to make it more of a mini CNOC conference, a real conference. And we're going to be looking for other added services. We've put together, as a member service, a business-to-business guide, so everybody in CNOC gets to see what the other people are selling and what they're selling it for. So you can not only buy services from me if I had any space left, but you can buy services from Telnet, which many of us do, services from all sorts of different people. And so now we find that we're selling to each other more than we ever have before, helping each other out, because we found that we have a lot more in common than we do in terms of competing with one another. We're always looking for new and other interesting things to do, but it's all in the name of building up the community. And so that's sort of my long-winded approach or long-winded story on how we got together and started doing member services. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Michael. So I chair the Government Relations Committee, and I'll tell you a bit about that in a moment, but when Michael was telling something, it reminded me of a story that I thought I'd share. As CNOC's president, one of the most interesting challenges is having a board of directors and members that, for the most part, are 35 class 1 type A control freaks, and it's an interesting dynamic, but it really works well. And I was reminded back to one of those initial meetings you talked about, the one we were behind French Street, but we had a meeting, I think it was back in the Global Live offices back in the early days, and we had just formed our initial board, and it was kind of like, who's going to lead this thing? And there was a couple people who were interested. So I get back to my office the next day, and my phone rings. It's Michael. He goes, Bill, it's Michael. Hey, Michael, how are you? Good. He goes, hey, I saw your email, so you want to be the president, huh? And I'm like, hey, I think it's a new challenge that I'd like to take on. He goes, yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing myself. I'm like, oh, Christ, here we go. And anyway, he says, well, I think we can sort this out between us, which we ultimately did. He goes, but what happens if we don't? And I said, I don't know. I guess we have a board election. And at the time, the last Toronto mayoral race was going on. Michael pipes up and goes, this is perfect. I'll be Smitherman, you be Ford. True story, Mike, I'll tell you. And I'm like, okay, what do you mean by that?
Smitherman was ahead at that time. So.
Needless to say, I would like to hope that our leadership together at CNOC is better than what's happened across the street. So anyway, moving on from storytelling, I lead the Government Relations Committee, and we spend a lot of time liaising with stakeholders. In Ottawa, we meet regularly with Industry Canada. We meet with the CRTC from time to time when we don't have a direct file in front of them that we can't speak about. We're often in front of other government officials, MPs, cabinet ministers, Prime Minister's office. We contract, and we have an excellent government relations consultant, Lynn Hamilton, who's in the room, who helps us out with that. And she does a lot of legwork for us as well up in Ottawa. And I got to admit that when we first started talking about government relations and lobbying per se, back in the day, I thought to myself, how is this ever going to work? Does this stuff really work? How are we really going to get the credibility that we want as an organization? And I fast forward to today, where circulating in amongst those of us in the community right now are pictures where people like Matt and myself have recently been photographed with the Prime Minister and various cabinet ministers. We were invited, and I got to attend the throne speech and not only sit in the gallery, but actually sit on the Senate floor. We are regularly now being reached out to by those in Ottawa, so we will get calls from Industry Canada or the PMO or others saying, hey, we've got something going on and we want to speak with you about it. We want to hear what you guys have to say, which tells us that we really effectively reached our goal. One of our goals was that we wanted to be the de facto voice for the competitive communications sector in Canada. And I remember when we said those words that was our goal, and I was thinking, yeah, right, we'll never get there. But 4 years later, we are there. We are it. We are that voice. We've been largely successful, and we see it coming back from the government. So, we have a great government relations team. We're very active, and we're doing all sorts of good work, including working on the files that you see today, and things like the upcoming wholesale services and some of the government relations work that needs to be done about that, but also formulating some of the ideas for services in the future that we don't even have yet, but we're trying to float past the government to see if they'll fly, et cetera. So it's a really, really interesting committee, and it's been good to be a part of. And, we have an excellent team and committee that works on that. So that sort of brings us full circle as to, what CNOC does and how we're structured. And I think the conversation now turns to those of you in the room that aren't CNOC members. As we talk to a lot of people about CNOC, I've heard from people that say, CNOC, it can be expensive. I don't know if we can afford to join. And I think what we're trying to show you here today, especially going into the next year with the wholesale services framework proceeding and other things, is that we think that you can't afford not to join. The future of our industry is really in our hands, and it's the work that we're doing that is ensuring that we're going to have a bright and prosperous future together. And we need all hands on deck. We need everybody to come forward and be a part. We believe that we bring good value for the cost of what's involved with being with CNOC. And we ask you to strongly consider talking to us, join up with us, be part of the team, be part of the community. We certainly could use your assistance, and we think we can deliver value back to you. With that, I'll just take it back to my colleagues and see if there's anything further that you wanted to add.
A lot of what we do when we get involved, none of us get paid to get involved. In fact, we pay to be involved as members of CNOC. And you hear some people refer to it as a thankless job. And in a lot of ways, it is thankless. You don't get any financial benefit from it. But every once in a while, you get something that you'll never be able to get anywhere else. When together we know we've worked hard and put forward an opinion, and suddenly the commission agrees with us, or we get good coverage in the press. Even if you become part of CNOC and you've had anything to do with government relations, there is nothing more terrifying and at the same time exhilarating as participating with CNOC at a CRTC hearing. It is probably one of the most gratifying experiences you'll ever have. You get to tell your story. They don't just want to hear from big guys, they want to hear from everybody of all sizes. So if you think, well, they wouldn't want to hear from me, you're wrong. They do want to hear from everybody, all of us of all different sizes, whether we're business, whether we're residential, whether we've got 1,000 subscribers or 250,000 subscribers, they want to hear. And this is your venue, this is your way to get involved. And if you don't want to just be sitting back saying, wow, this happened to me and I had nothing to say about it, this is your opportunity to step up and have your voice through CNOC.
Just to add to that quickly as well, echo everything Michael said, and as one of the smaller CNOC members, it's really, I wondered when I joined whether or not I'd get the value out of it, and you get the returns tenfold, because it actually does give a stronger voice than I think I'd ever have a chance as a smaller ISP, because CNOC has been very good at making sure ISPs, big or small, very large, we do always try and find a common view and make sure that, and I think it was said yesterday in the panel, sometimes bigger guys or smaller guys have taken a hit on a certain view just to make sure that we're doing something for the common good. So I would encourage small or large to consider if you're not a member today.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the things that I think is unique about, or maybe not unique, but important about CNOC is that every member, small, large, has the same voice, the same vote. It doesn't matter if you're a $500,000 or a $250 million company, you have the same input, and much like Paul just said, it's amazing how you can get 30 A-type personalities to reach consensus. It's just incredible.
We really should get some science research or something to watch our meetings. It's kind of amazing. It shouldn't happen, but it does.
And I think a lot of that is the trust that we've been able to build. And I think so much of the value, not only, of course, the incredible value I think that we're bringing to the industry in terms of helping shape our industry, ensure that we have a bright and prosperous future, is the intangibles. It's the one-on-ones, it's the after dinners, it's all the side things. And you realize that, all of your competitors are going through the exact same issues, and so often you're able to talk to someone and say, well, how did you overcome this issue? How did you solve this issue? And it's amazing the additional value, the intangibles that you get out of this organization.
Two final closing points. One of them, one more small story about our successes, and then a closing thought. When we went back to saying that we wanted to be the de facto voice and we wanted to be heard by the government, it reminded me of a story. But 2 years ago, there was a file that we were working on pretty heavily. I won't get into which one, but I'm sure everybody knows the big one from 2 years ago. And we got a call from one of the ministers responsible's office saying, hey, can you guys kind of give us just a one-page position paper, what you're thinking on this one? So we worked together. I think the committee got together and scrambled something up quickly, and we sent it over. 2 days later, that minister's office put out a press release, and one of our paragraphs was cut and paste word for word into the minister's press release. So it was kind of it was a real shocker to us of, wow, this guy's saying our words. And it was a real eye-opener as to one of our first levels of success on that front. And finally, to echo sort of what Michael had said earlier, as much as we've sat up here and talked to you today a lot about the committees and the work we do, et cetera, a lot of what CNOC does and what of our meetings are are exactly what you're seeing here in the summit. It's the getting together with everybody, the talks in the hallways, the sharing of experiences, the friendships and business relationships that are being formed, and we really want the rest of the sector to join us and be a part of it. So if you have any questions, be sure to approach either one of us.
We have a little bit of time for questions.
Yeah. Anyone questions? All right, hearing none, your sign-up forms are at the front desk. And, thank you for attending the summit as well, and we look forward to seeing you amongst us soon. Thanks.
Thank you.